We thought we'd do a real live test of Governor O'Malley, and had his flight diverted from Midway to O'Hare, and make him take the train into town to hook up with his troopers, and so he is on his way, but he's going to be a little bit delayed. And Steve Edwards and Steve will be moderating the discussion with Governor O'Malley. He's tying his shoe out here because Steve doesn't ever like to appear with an untied shoe. But I thought we could have a little bit of a discussion about where this nascent presidential race is to begin with, and sort of set the stage for the conversation. Huh?
Am I supposed to join you right here?
Yes, have a seat.
Nice. I get to ask the questions though, right? Because you know things. I actually don't know things. I just know.
That's what you always say, and then you always surprise me. All right, go ahead.
Well, I mean, you know, it's interesting. I mean, here we are now, just you know, a few weeks into the new year. We have the State of the Union. A few days into the new year, we have the State of the Union address coming. And it seems that the nation and the political class have sort of moved beyond the administration right now. Every day, more articles from Politico and the like, ranking where we are. On the Democratic side of the ledger, let's start there since that's relevant to tonight. How do you see this race shaping up and where Hillary figures in all of this?
Well, I mean, I think it's the Democratic side. It seems pretty clear, right? You've got Hillary Clinton and everybody else. And everybody else is a rather small class. I mean, she is in the most dominant position, and I don't think Governor O'Malley would necessarily disagree with this, although he might. I don't think there's been a more dominant candidate for an open seat race in a party for a nomination in my lifetime. And that doesn't mean that she'll win.
Yeah.
But if you were to bet, you would bet heavily. You look at the polling, and her numbers are very, very strong among Democrats and strong across. You know, there's this sense, and you see it written about, that there's this, you know, liberal backlash, but it's not obvious in the polling. Her numbers are pretty uniform among Democrats, from moderate to liberal Democrats, but there are two issues. One is she hasn't said she's actually going to run, and I think everybody assumes she's going to run. She seems to be doing everything that you need to run, but I honestly believe she hasn't decided
really
that she is absolutely going to run. Yeah. And
why do you say that?
Just based on my reading of her,
yeah,
my discussions with people. You know, one thing about Hillary Clinton is one of the reasons why she is in a commanding position right now is that she is far more experienced than anybody else in the field in terms of her exposure to what the presidency is and what the job entails. And because she is exposed to what the presidency is and what the job entails, she, like any rational person, would have some pause about signing up for that job. And at this stage in her life, I think she's giving it real consideration. She knows better than any living person on this planet, other than the people who've served in the job, what the job requires. And therefore, I think, you know, she's deciding whether or not that she wants to sign up for it, not just the office itself, but she also knows what's involved in running for it. Yeah. And so I think there's, you know, a small chance, I wouldn't rate it as a large chance, but I take her at her word that she's thinking about it. So if you're Governor O'Malley and there's a prospect that she might not run, better to have established yourself as a potential candidate. Secondly, you know, she was a prohibitive favorite last time, not nearly what she is today. Times were different. I don't think she was in as good a position then, yeah. But she, you know, she proved vulnerable then. She'll have to run a good campaign this time.
What should she do differently? I mean, Ryan Lizza had that piece about the inevitability trap. There's been talk about, there's some dangers there.
I think I've contributed to that myself.
So how should she think about this campaign?
I think she should think like an insurgent. I think that that inevitability is a trap, and I've said that before. I think that inevitability causes you to be cautious, causes you to be conventional, causes you not to want to take risks. And, there was an old baseball manager in Chicago in the 1960s, Eddie Stanky, managed the White Sox, and he said, no win baseball is second division baseball. And that's true in politics, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you play not to lose, you often lose. And my perception of Secretary Clinton was that she wasn't a very good candidate in 2007. I thought she was an excellent candidate in 2008, and I can tell you as someone who was running the campaign against her, because once she lost that initial, the initial caucuses, once she wasn't the front runner anymore, once she was fighting for her place, she threw all the caution away, and I think she started relating to voters in a much more visceral way that reflected who she really is. And if I had any advice for her, it would be that person. Throw caution to the wind. Go out there and make your case. So that's number one. Second thing is, in 2007, the mistake they made was they allowed the candidacy to get out in front of the rationale for it. People knew she was running. She was the front runner. There was enthusiasm, but it wasn't clear what the campaign was about. And I think campaigns have to be about something. And when you don't have a rationale, then it becomes sort of a cult of personality.
Well, and what is the rationale that you see right now?
Well, look, I think for any candidate, and I think this is on both sides, the great challenge facing the country is how you build an economy in the 21st century that creates opportunity for broad numbers of people. How do you create a prosperity that's broadly shared? Our economy we're doing. I went to the White House in 2009, and we were poised. We were on the precipice of potentially a depression, and since that time, the stock market's up 180%. We've seen, we saw 5% growth in the last, but the wage growth has been flat, and not just through the crisis where we fell way behind, but over the last, many years. That's the nature of the modern economy, because technology, globalization has conspired against wage growth and has marginalized a lot of middle-class jobs, created more opportunities, but those opportunities tend to be among highly educated people. So how do you deal with these forces? That's the real economic challenge we have, and I think the candidate who can speak to that is the candidate who's going to win, Republican or Democrat.
Let's switch for a minute to talk a little bit about the GOP side of the ledger, because I think there was a lot of sense looking ahead to 2016 that Republicans were champing at the bit, that they would have this Obama fatigue to run against. And now as you start to look at potential economic projections over the next 2 years, you could see, we're seeing the job growth start to increase. You mentioned the stock market. We could see unemployment down below 5%, GDP growth, if current projections hold, where now you're a Republican trying to make a case against a party that is actually leaving office with a trajectory that's rising. So if you're in the Republican Party right now, you're thinking about this race, how should we be thinking about the case that you want to make?
I saw that Senator McConnell said the other day that he thought that the economy was taking off now as a reaction to the Republicans taking over Congress, which is good. If all of this is in response to 2 days of their tenure, that's the future is really promising. But the I think that elections are always about the future. I think the president sets the context, the outgoing president. I've always said people look for even if a president's wildly popular, people look for the remedy and not the replica of what they have. And that was the premise on which the Obama campaign was based in 2008. He was the most distinctive alternative to the Bush approach. I think that'll be true to some degree as well this year. I think people, when in 2008, people were, they thought Bush was too black and white, Manichean, didn't see the nuances, didn't see the gray area. They wanted someone who could. Obama was that guy. Now people are a little tired of nuance. They want someone a little bit more black and white, and I don't mean racially. I mean black and white in terms of how
certitude and clarity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They want that. So I think that will be a quality people might be looking for in a candidate. But I really think that the question people are going to ask is like, what's next? What's next for the country? And the candidates that can articulate how we deal with this big economic challenge I mentioned, how we deal with a very uncertain world. And that gives people a sense of a theory of the case. Are going to do well.
I mean, implicit in the Obama campaign in 2008 also was this call for generational change. There's sort of an old way of doing things, an old guard, and there was an opportunity and a need to sort of turn the page, right? Well, if we have an election and a campaign in which there's a Clinton and potentially a Bush.
You don't think that's new? You don't think that's new?
I mean, to some people perhaps who were born yesterday. But,
I think it puts a real burden on both those candidates, if they turn out to be the candidates, to articulate visions that are fresh and are new and speak to the future. I don't think anybody's looking for retrospective campaigns, and no one's looking for nostalgia campaigns. Yeah. These candidates are going to have to articulate a vision for the future that excite people and interest people. And I think one of the reasons, in addition to mulling over whether she wants to do it, I'm sure that Hillary Clinton is thinking through what the vision is that she wants to present, because she knows it's not enough to simply say. And look, Jeb Bush, he's been working on the education reform issue, immigration reform, obviously. He's got his own ideas that point to the future, but there's going to be a special burden on them. Otherwise, they're going to be defined by the past.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the field on the Republican side.
Yeah. We should finish out Bernie Sanders.
Right, of course. Jim Webb.
And right. Jim Webb, who's going to be here at the end of this month. Both interesting people. And then the big Elizabeth Warren thing that hangs out there like a. And
do you think there's anything to that? Anything real that would get her in?
I think that she sees her role as trying to define where the candidate goes. I'm not sure that she sees her role as being the candidate, but she understands that there's tremendous leverage in the possibility that she could be a candidate. I mean, that's how you move the party. That's how you move the candidates. And so my guess is that that's what she's doing. She believes deeply in her.
Finish your thought.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Special guest.
I was hoping to make like ladies and gentlemen, but not that these folks aren't worthy of introduction. But I think that she believes deeply in this middle class argument that she's made about about. She believes that the deck has been stacked against the middle class, and she's been writing about it for years, long before she was in politics. And she wants to make sure that that's incorporated in the vision and the thinking of the Democratic Party.
I mean, you could have in Governor O'Malley, and you could have
wait a second.
Of the devil.
I was running out of things to say.
Pulling the conversation in that direction. So well, I'll step aside and let you introduce the governor, and then we'll continue with the governor in a minute.
First of all, welcome. I said before you arrived that part of the presidency And the presidency is just filled with adversity every day. So we decided to have a real-life test to see how you bore up under adversity by diverting your plane to O'Hare and making you take the CTA in. So plenty of voters there, and I'm sure they're in a good mood too. Governor, one of the things that, our mission here is to encourage young people, inculcate young people with a sense that being in the public arena is a meaningful way to change the world, to make a difference. And it seems like you're a good role model for them, because I know you began your career driving Gary Hart around when he was running for president in 1984. Was it 84? Was it that campaign?
Actually, 82, right. I was a student at Catholic U, and I was bored, and I wanted to do something to push back against the choices that were being made at the time by Ronald Reagan. And so I walked in with a friend from high school to Gary Hart's headquarters in 82.
And they said, do you have a driver's license?
Stayed there. Right. I barely had a driver's license.
Yeah. But, but you're a good example of how you start there and you become mayor of a great city, governor of a great state. You've had a chance to make a great deal of difference there, and now traveling the country. You can explain why. But now I just got to talking here, but you remind me what the format is here, Steve. Am I supposed to formally introduce?
Yeah, hey, Michael.
So, Governor O'Malley just finished his tenure as governor of Maryland. He was and finished with a burst of very significant progressive legislation. I'll let him talk about that. Was a very successful mayor of Baltimore. Before that, came out of urban politics, something close to my own heart, and he was head of the Democratic Governors Association, and is now traveling the country and talking about the future of the country and his own plans. So we're delighted that you're here, and we appreciate the great effort you made to get here. And why don't you take a few minutes to tell folks what you're up to, and then Steve Edwards, who is the executive director of the IOP, and before that was a mainstay on public radio here in Chicago, will lead a conversation. We'll take some questions from these young people and young at heart people.
Awesome. Awesome. Look, David, thank you very, very much. Thank you for inviting me to Chicago in January. The last time, David, you mentioned, I want to thank you also for what you've done with this institute and what you're building up. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your day to be here, and to those of you who are studying here and feel a passion in your heart to get into public service and into politics. I just want to encourage you in the strongest way to follow that passion and follow your heart, because your country needs you and your world needs you. And as cynical as these times are, and as much as we wallow in a lot of distrust and disbelief when it comes to one another and our capacity to change the world, the happy fact of the matter is we are still Americans, and we forge our own future by the choices that we make. Many years ago, as David mentioned, I worked for Gary Hart, and his presidential campaigns, underline the S in campaigns. When the last time I was here, I think in this time of the year, was when I made the mistake of telling Senator Hart on the eve of his re-entry into the race in late 1987, when everybody thought he had been out, wasn't coming back. I made the mistake of telling Senator Hart when he was worried about getting on the ballot in states that had tough requirements for signatures, like Illinois, that were coming up right on the heels of his would-be re-entry. I said, Senator, that's not going to be a problem. And so when he got back into the race, I got the message from Bill Shore, congratulations, you're in charge of getting Senator Hart on the ballot. And Bill said, there's a ticket waiting for you tomorrow at BWI Airport. I was in law school then. And he said to fly you to Chicago at 9 a.m. And this would have been December 20th or something like that. And I said, well, I have a torts exam at 9 a.m. Can we move it to noon? So that's what I did. I came out here with Paul Weissman, who was my age at the time, later went on to become the Senate Majority Leader of the Colorado State Senate, and also Alan Casey, who founded City Year in Boston. And the three of us got hard on the ballot and here in 1987, and it was cold then too. So this is an easier gig for me. Let me share with you briefly my story. I was raised in a household where my parents taught us that politics was an honorable calling and an honorable service. And we had, pictures on the wall and old campaign buttons and things. Both my maternal and paternal grandparents had been active in politics in their respective states of Pennsylvania and Indiana. After moving to Baltimore for law school and graduating there, I joined the state's attorney's office. I was an assistant state's attorney for a couple of years. I ran for state senate at the age of 27 against the chairman of the city senators. And my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, said, "He's going to beat you like a drum." We ended up losing, they say, by 43 votes. It came down to the absentees. And that's a longer story over a beer for another time. But anyway, the next year a seat opened up on the Baltimore City Council. And while I had not intended to go into city service, my friends were so shocked I had come so close on the state senate race that they encouraged me to try, and I did. I served 2 terms there and was getting ready to get out when all of a sudden, in the mayor's race in Baltimore City that most of us thought Kwesi Mfume would be the kind of anointed and drafted next mayor, he decided not to run. And our city by that time had become the most violent, the most addicted, and the most abandoned city in America. And I felt, I don't know what you would call it, I felt compelled by a voice within to try. And I told my wife, I said, "You've got to let me try. Because if we don't try and we don't turn this around, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people are going to die for no good reason." I had seen what they were doing in New York. I had seen this new way of governing, ComStat, performance measured, collaborative, common platforms, relentless follow-up, timely, accurate information shared by all. And I kept asking the question as a councilman, if they can do it up there, why can't we try it here and see if it might work? And we campaigned all through that hot summer. It was a campaign where we talked about justice and injustice. We talked about our fears and our distrusts of one another. And at the end of the day, we took a chance. We trusted one another. And over the next 10 years, with performance-measured policing, with greater investments in drug treatment, Baltimore went on to achieve the biggest reduction in Part 1 crime of any major city in America. A government that works is really, really important. In fact, it's hard to restore trust, that essential thing that we hold between us, if our government's not working, if our government's not delivering results, if every other entity that we deal with, whether it's Amazon or our bank or the 7-Eleven, seems to be more technically savvy than our own government. I carried those lessons into state government. In Baltimore, we created this new way of governing. We weren't trying to be clever, though we did earn the Innovations in Government Award from the Kennedy School at Harvard, the place where people go when they can't get into this institution. And we took that new way of governing that was ComStat, we took it enterprise-wide in the city of Baltimore. We call it CityStat. And today, now in America, that's how 18 of the 20 largest cities are run, with some sort of 311 center on the front end, portal for all citizens, a portal for all citizens, and also the common platform and the measurement in City Hall. And open and transparent thanks to the internet, thanks to GIS, thanks to all of these technologies that, believe it or not, just weren't here the way they are now everywhere in our world. So we took that same method and we applied it to our state government. Now, our biggest challenge there turned out to be the recession and weathering the recession. We were more performance measured than ever. Our government was operating better than ever, but it's hard to keep moving forward when a recession knocks $2 billion out of your bottom line, drives foreclosures up to record levels, and puts more of your people out of work than have ever been put out of work at any time since the Great Depression. But unlike other states, rather than trying to cut our way to prosperity, we actually called a special session, fortunately, just before the recession had hit, to address the bad math of our recent past. We were left a $1.7 billion deficit, so we did a lot of difficult and unpopular things. We put in place a progressive income tax, asking the top 15% of us to pay more. We asked everyone to do another penny on the sales tax. We also increased the earned income tax credit, but we raised the corporate income tax by 1%. And because of those choices, not only was Maryland one of only 7 states to weather the recession with a AAA bond rating every single year, we pulled off more important accomplishments than that. We made our schools the #1 schools in America 5 years in a row, with record investments every single year, both in operating and in capital. We did more than any other state to hold down the cost of college tuition, freezing in-state tuition to no increases for 4 years in a row. Our Maryland now has the highest median income in the country, and we held that designation all through the recession. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is hardly a mouthpiece for the Maryland Democratic Party, named our state the #1 state for innovation and entrepreneurship. And along the way, we did a number of other things as well. We passed marriage equality. We passed the DREAM Act, the state version. Both of those were petitioned to referendum by our Republican brothers and sisters, and we carried both of those referenda by pretty substantial and strong margins. We raised the minimum wage. We passed comprehensive gun safety legislation. We repealed the death penalty. And we, for the first time in 350 years, recognized the Native American people of our place, of Maryland, the Piscataway people. I underscore those last few items for this reason. One of the most important things that we share as a people are the beliefs that unite us, and none more important than the dignity of every person. We understand in our state that our diversity is our strength, that we're all in this together, and that we have to help each other if we're going to succeed. Now, I know that there's been a lot of talk lately, and I'll kind of wrap up with this. After the very disappointing midterms, we're all asking ourselves, what might we have done differently as a party? Where is the progressive movement going? If this is the sort of shellacking we receive in the midterms, we're certainly asking ourselves that question at home in Maryland, where, notwithstanding the fact that voters elected a Democratic comptroller by overwhelming numbers, Democratic Attorney General, Democratic Senate, Democratic House, unfortunately, from our perspective, the people voted to elect a Republican governor. And so we're asking ourselves those questions as well. It has been my experience that it's not enough to simply disqualify your opponent with negative ads on issues that may well be very, very important. If in those disqualifications you fail to make your case, the affirmative economic case for why the choices we have to offer are better for you and your family than the choices the other guy has to offer. I mean, I tried this theory out 2 months out from my own reelection, after we had had to do all those other unpopular things on revenues and cuts. We found ourselves tied with my opponent, the guy I had beaten the first time, an incumbent governor, and we were virtually tied 2 months out. But instead of simply going into a campaign of disqualification, We brought everything back to the choices that we can, must, and can only make together if we're going to make our children winners in this changing economy rather than losers. And with unemployment twice as high and foreclosures twice as high, come election day, we won by 14 points in 2010. I've been all around the country over the course of the last year. I campaigned for a lot of really good people. And some of them were successful, like Governor Hickenlooper in Denver, who brought it back to economics and jobs and the opportunity, and also Daniel Malloy in Connecticut, who brought it back to jobs and opportunity. And some of them were not successful. Every state's a little different. But I've seen something really positive coming over the horizon, and I'll end on these three, David, and we'll hopefully open it up some more to other conversation and searching. There are three really positive things I've learned in traveling around our country. Number one, as down as we are about how our Congress functions or dysfunctions or refuses to function, people all across our country are feeling a heck of a lot better about how their cities are run than they did 10, 15 years ago. Cities aren't perfect places. It's where we've done our best. It's also where we have the most opportunity to unleash. But people are feeling a lot better about how their cities are run, and I'd submit to you that part of the reason is cities are better governed now than they have been at any time in a long time. One of the biggest public safety and public administration wins in the United States of America has been the reduction in violent crime and the reduction in homicides across the country in big cities. Secondly, I'm noticing a huge generational shift. And this is the leading characteristic that I see in it. Many of us baby boomers, I'm like a tail end baby boomer. I think I'm technically the last of the baby boomers. I was born in 1963, so I consider myself kind of between times. Many of our baby boomers generation, we were told that the key to success is distance and separation from others. But people under 40 believe that their better future and their greater opportunities and prosperity is going to be found through better and closer connections to others. And that's a big positive shift, especially for the trust we need to restore in our country and in one another now. And the third thing that I've noticed is that there is a growing consensus about how our economy works when it's actually working. And sadly, it's born from the fact that right now it's not working very well for most of us. Working a hell of a lot better than it was, thanks to President Obama's better choices. We saw GDP growth in the last quarter up to 5%, which was more, by the way, than candidate Romney or candidate Gingrich promised they would achieve if the people had voted for them. But there's something wrong when wages continue to stagnate, when most families in generational terms aren't doing as well today as they were in the last generation. And we've got to fix this. In 5 states, very different states, North Dakota, what were some of the other ones? Here in Illinois, Arkansas, Nebraska, voters, Democrats and Republicans alike, even as they voted many times for Republican governors who were opposed to raising the minimum wage, Democrats, Republicans, and independents across the board voted in huge, huge margins to raise the minimum wage. There's an emerging consensus that the way our economy works is by strengthening our middle class. In other words, a stronger middle class, workers who are earning more. A stronger middle class is actually the cause of economic growth. It's not some luxury we afford when things are going gangbusters. It is the basis of how our country's economy functions when it's actually functioning well for all of us. And I would submit to you, if you had these other ballot initiatives on Election Day in front of Democratic and Republican voters, I bet they would have passed too. Raising the threshold for overtime pay, taxing income from investment earnings at the same rate that you tax earnings from sweat and labor so that we can invest to educate better, innovate more, rebuild our infrastructure, and give this generation and the next a better shot at a better future. If those things were on the ballot, I'll bet you Republicans and Democratic voters would have voted for those things as well. And so where does this leave us? It leaves us with this, that our country goes through times like these times, when we find ourselves polarized and confused. And sometimes it's hard to make sense of the decisions voters make in any one election. But this truth remains. We are a good, we are a generous, we are a caring, and we are a compassionate people. And we have to liberate the goodness that is within us. Do the things that work. Have the guts to embrace openness, transparency, big data, performance measurement on a scale we've never had the ability to do before as a people. And if we do those things, and if we understand that we're all in this together, and that our middle class is the source of economic growth, we're going to give our country 40 really great years ahead of us. But we need you to be engaged, and we need you to do it too. We're all in this together, and each one of us is needed. Thanks a lot. Thank you. And may I also say my compliments to the mayor of Chicago. The streets, notwithstanding the snow, were looking really good. and also the L was clean and fast and got us in.
That's great. Well, Governor, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for those remarks. I should just say, what I want to do here is I'll start with a question or two to seed the conversation, but all of you have been sitting here for a long time. It's a cold night. I know you want to have a chance to ask questions of the governor as well, so we'll move very, very quickly to your questions. Let me start with, I think, a question that's on a lot of people's minds, and that has to do with your interest in possible run for the White House. Just before the end of the year, the Washington Post sort of characterized you as in a wait-and-see mode. How would you characterize where you are as you think about 2016 right now?
I'm very seriously considering running in 2016. Right now, my primary responsibility is to move my family back to Baltimore, which I will do in another week. And so I'm going to be taking some time over the next couple of months to get my family resituated and make us well and get us back to the city where we all feel comfortable. But I have, I'm very seriously looking at it, is what I would say. And I've been encouraged as I travel around the country by the number of people who repeat again and again and again their desire for getting things done again as a country, and also for new leadership in order to get those things done.
You talked a little bit about this in your remarks, the election results in Maryland, certainly, and across the country. And I think you hinted at some of this. But one of the things that's been said about your prospects is that they were hurt significantly by the midterms, and hurt specifically by the fact that your Lieutenant Governor Anthony Brown was unsuccessful in his bid to become governor. So, how do you explain that? Why do you think he was unsuccessful, given the kind of record of accomplishments you ticked off in previous session?
I'll let others determine whether the prospects were hurt. I can tell you my feelings were hurt. We had done a lot of really good things in Maryland, and yet you did not hear much of that during the campaign. I was not on the ballot in Maryland. When I was on the ballot, when we were criticized and our opponents hit us for many of those same votes that they hit our lieutenant governor for, unemployment was twice as high, and most of those votes were 6 years fresher, and we prevailed by 14 points by always coming back to the purpose of those tough choices, which is more jobs and better opportunities for our kids. We achieved, since the depths of the recession, a faster rate of job creation than our neighbors in Virginia or Pennsylvania. Highest median income and best schools. And yet you never heard those things in the course of our campaign this year.
Best schools 5 years in a row, I believe, right?
5 years in a row. And But you rarely heard that affirmative story, that affirmative economic story of the better choices that yield those better results. When we told that larger story in 2010, and I'm repeating myself, we won by pretty overwhelming margins.
Let's take some questions from those of you, and then I can chime in. Yes, sir. We'll get a microphone over to you. And great.
Okay, yeah, so thank you for braving the cold. So as a potential aspirant to the Democratic nomination, what do you see as sort of the hot topic issues of the 2016 campaign? Like, what do you think is going to drive the debate and sort of define the campaign next year?
I think the driving issue is the question of how we make our economy work again for all of us. And we've come a long way in restoring that economy, but we're not yet to a point where wages are actually rising again, where people feel that if they're working harder, they'll be able to get further ahead. And that's what I hear again and again around the country. I mean, I think there was an article recently, it was a Politico, that talked about the strides we've made by many objective measures, GDP, stock market. But if 90% of the gains in GDP went to only the top 10% of our nation in terms of economic advancement, then we can't really say we're done with this work. President Obama's made better choices for us. Really has done, the auto industry, the banks, I mean, we can go through the litany. We've done a lot of good work restoring what was broken, but we have yet to recover that forward momentum where our economy works for all of us. And that's what I hear out there all the time. I'm curious what you all think is the main issue. It's about jobs and opportunity and making our economy work for all of us.
Just a quick follow-up to that. I mean, we've seen a lot of this data talking about the growing income inequality. We hear people talk about it, people you encounter. We hear people certainly talk about it in the media. But it seems to have not yet galvanized into a broader movement that is dominating the public conversation, the policy conversation, the front page coverage. Why not, and what's it going to take, do you think?
Well, I think that's coming. And I do believe that those referenda that Democrats and Republicans joined forces to pass to raise the minimum wage is one indication of that. But there's no simple or easy solution to making our economy work again for all of us. It's a number of a number of choices we need to make in conjunction with one another. At the state level, there are many states that have done this better than we have as a nation. The Pew Foundation does a ranking of states and named our state, Maryland, one of the top 3 for upward economic mobility at a time when this is the issue we're struggling with as a nation. It wasn't just because of minimum wage. It wasn't just because of the investments in education and college affordability. It wasn't just because of the investments in infrastructure. It wasn't just because of the acceleration of innovation. It was all of those things. And we have yet to do those things as a nation. And we aren't going to do it by investing less. We have to restore our finances and in order to make these investments, just as our parents and grandparents did.
Let's take a question from this side of the room. Yes, and then we'll... and I should say that I'm prioritizing student questions for now, but we'll get to some of the others too as well.
Thank you for coming, Governor O'Malley.
Thank you. What's your name?
I'm James.
Hello, James.
The death penalty has been a very controversial issue, and ever since Dukakis, lots of politicians have shied away from it. So what led you to take this political risk of repealing the death penalty, and how do you think that might affect your campaign, possible campaign?
On question 2, I don't know. On question 1, sometimes these issues find you. We had not really even campaigned. It never came up once in any of the gubernatorial debates we had. Rarely came up in community meetings and in campaigning in 2006. But after I was elected and before I took the oath, our Court of Appeals struck down our death penalty statute and said that it had the regulations for strapping a prisoner down and injecting his or her veins with lethal injections. 3 different drugs were not promulgated properly. So I commissioned, I'm getting ahead of myself on the process. I think the call of your question is this. Look, there's some issues where you really can't ask yourself, which way is the wind going to blow on this 4 years from now, or in the next election, or in the next 2 elections, or in the next 3 elections? Because the only thing you have in your power to preserve when you're done with these temporary trusts and these temporary jobs of whether it's in a legislature, an elected executive, is your own integrity and the knowledge that you did what you thought was right for the people you served. And so we commissioned a panel, went all around the state, took testimony. Ben Civiletti, former Attorney General of the United States, a Maryland resident, chaired it. Took it to a vote in the legislature, and it failed by a couple of votes. And then in the next election, we thought we still didn't have the votes. And in the meantime, nobody was willing to put forward the regulations either. And then and then one vote changed, and that changed another. And then we were able to repeal the death penalty. And in terms of the latest news, the commutations, that seemed just to me to be the right thing to do to hopefully bring some greater closure to the families. We had 4 people, by the way, to catch up, 4 people who were on death row who had been sentenced before we repealed it. And so I recently decided to commute those sentences after spending a lot of time with the surviving family members. Thank you for asking that.
Liz, are you our sole mic runner in the room tonight? Yes. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go.
I'm sorry. Can I go back on this? And I'm not going to be as long-winded, I promise, so we'll get more questions in. But one of the things that helped us to repeal the death penalty was the fact that Maryland has achieved the biggest reductions in violent crime in 35 years. I mean, we're doing the things that work that actually reduce crime. And when we find things that are expensive, that don't work and are not a deterrent, we should stop doing them. And that was also part of the argument for repealing the death penalty.
So Liz, just a signal to you, I'll go here and then I'll swing it all the way and we'll just sort of move like a typewriter across. Great? All right, just to help you out. Thanks.
Hi, Governor. Thanks for joining us.
What's your name?
My name's Connor.
Connor.
My question is about how you've been very vocal on climate change, and I was wondering how you think that progressive policymakers can keep this, can keep Americans interested in continuing to take definitive action on this issue, even despite everything that's been happening with oil pricing and the possibility of a Keystone pipeline. How can we keep this in the national dialogue?
Well, I believe we need to do 2 things better than we have so far. One, we have to wrap this imperative of addressing climate change in a prosperity framework. And secondly, we have to do a much better job of putting forward a jobs agenda, an American jobs agenda, that's a match for the climate challenge. And so oftentimes when we, in the past, recent past, when we've talked about this, possibly biggest issue of our times, we've talked about it in these sort of end of the world, Cassandra-like terms. And when you look at the science, and it's easy to draw those lines. Unfortunately, you're drawing straight lines to hell. So we have to talk about these choices that we have to make in the face of this challenge as choices that will bring about more, not less. More prosperity, more jobs, greater security. It has to be in a framework of prosperity and jobs. And I think if we do that, I think we can excite that American imagination that always allows us to get up for big challenges.
Governor, what's a policy mix that does that? What's the case you make when you go to Southern Illinois coal country and you go to other parts of the country where there may be real concern about not only changing environmental policy, but implicitly sort of changing the economics that undergird the communities in which they live?
Yeah, well, none of this is easy, but we have to we have to accept the science. The good news is that people under 40, I mean, you rarely, I don't meet many climate deniers that are under 40. I mean, I don't. I mean, Democratic or Republicans. That wasn't true just 10 years ago. So just as you've seen the question of marriage equality move very quickly, the question of immigration reform move very quickly, you're seeing this issue also move very quickly. What we haven't figured out is how to address the potential for job displacement, the sort of training programs, and the overlays that we need to apply so that people in coal country know there's other opportunities and other other training and opportunities available for them as we make this shift, and that as a nation we're not going to forget about people that have been displaced from these economies of extraction and depletion and fossil fuel burning, and have to do a much better job of allowing people in those regions, and we have some in Maryland as well as West Virginia, to see their own family in this new story.
Yes, this side.
Future's always a story.
Hi, Governor. Thanks for being here.
Sure. What's your name?
Allison.
Hello, Allison.
You talked a bit about how you use technology in Baltimore to kind of help the city and move it forward. And then more recently, there's been some pretty high-profile challenges at the national level with technology implementation. So I was wondering, what was an area where you saw technology would be able to move policy forward, and what would you do to help prevent some of the challenges we've seen in recent years from happening again?
Were you talking politely and in oblique terms about the healthcare launch?
I was.
Okay. Yeah, we didn't do very well on that. We set out as a state to be a leader. We have implemented so many fairly complex but important common platforms for driving better policy and better administration, really, and better results. I mean, the workforce exchange to match up where the skills are and where the opportunities and the demand for those skills happen to be. Baystat, common platform for reducing nitrogen, phosphorus, and sedimentary flow into our streams and rivers. On the healthcare one, we didn't do very well. We were one of those 20 states that jumped out in front. We hired a little company called IBM. Silly us. And we didn't do very well. States that hired Deloitte did very well. And in this time around, with Deloitte, we also implemented it very, very well without a glitch. In fact, it went so well that you'll barely read anything about it in the newspaper, which is a stark contrast to what they wrote last time around. So, yeah. So anyway, how do we make it? It's hard to recruit really good people in IT into government, and it's a relatively new thing for government. We'll get better as we go forward. But I don't understand how you sustain consensus for the right but sometimes politically difficult decisions if you can't show people whether you're getting better results for what you're doing. Our health information exchange, not to be confused with the shopping exchange, is actually working very well. It's ComStat, but is applied to public health. So you can heat map where the avoidable hospital room admissions are coming from in a neighborhood, do the interventions, and all of those things are working very well. And I'll bet you'll see more and more states bringing forward their power as convener and as common platforms to bring metro areas together as well. It's a short, wonky answer.
All right, let's, where is Liz? Oh, there you are, Liz.
I can do long, wonky answers,
and we'll come back.
Hi, my name is Baxter. I'm a first year here at the college.
Nobody's here from Baltimore or Maryland yet? You are.
I had my graduation actually in May.
Where was your graduation?
Bethesda Chevy Chase.
BCC. Go you Barons, blue and gold. Thank you. Baxter, back to you.
Yeah. Let's see. So I guess as a follow-up, talking about healthcare in this country, sort of more on the politics of it, how do you see the messaging for Democrats or progressives in the upcoming 2016 race to be? Are they going to run strongly on it? And also, is the issue going to fade away for Republican opposition?
I believe in our state, there are now 700,000, our population is 5.7 million. So there are now 700,000 people who have health care today who didn't have it the day Lieutenant Governor and I were sworn into office 8 years ago. And I'll bet you dollars to donuts, none of those 700,000 want to lose it. So I don't know if the Republicans in Congress will kind of move on, or if they'll keep hitting this. All I know, all I can advise my still serving Democratic governors to do is to continue to make it work, and make it work better, and drive those evolutions in terms of public health, eradicating childhood-lead poisoning, making the shift in terms of the alignment of payments, so that instead of paying hospitals like they're hotels, we pay them to keep people well and keep them out of the hospitals. I mean, these are the things that work. So we need to keep doing the things that work to improve the Affordable Care Act and improve the wellness of our people. And we also need to do, I think, a better job as a party in talking about the economic imperative of bringing down these, what had been ever escalating healthcare costs that were robbing families of discretionary dollars and also taking dollars out of businesses.
I'm going to take one more question from here. Yeah, we'll do right there, and then we'll let David close.
Hi, thank you for coming. I'm Rachel. So one of the things that I think is most distinctive about your time as governor is how you introduced the genuine progress indicator in Maryland. And I'm wondering if you think that...
Are you from Maryland?
No, I'm from New York.
Oh,
but I took a class on sustainability. So I'm
so pumped up that you know about that.
So I'm wondering if you think that GPI has a future nationally, because it's definitely very different from our traditional ways of measuring the economy.
Yeah, it sure is. And it's, your name again was Rachel? Rachel. Rachel's talking about the Genuine Progress Index. There's a little reported movement that's been going on among states, I think also some cities, where we have recognized that measures like the GDP aren't very holistic measures. It's one important yardstick, but it doesn't tell us what we need to know about whether or not we're actually creating generational wealth, whether or not we are improving quality of life. The GDP measures profit and pollution by the same measure. It doesn't tell us whether we're restoring the health of our streams or bringing back resources like the oyster. Stated another way, or the blue crab in the Chesapeake Bay. I mean, we could drive GDP way up if we fished every living being out of the Chesapeake Bay this year. But there wouldn't be anything left for next year. So what GPI does is it looks at a number of different indicators and creates a much more holistic measure about all of those things that make us proud to be Americans in the first place, and that make us love this place that is our country, and realize that we have a unique responsibility in the here and now to make it stronger and healthier and better for our kids and our kids' kids. So that's what GPI is. And the challenge now is taking those metrics and those graphs, some are moving in the right direction, some are moving in the wrong direction, and applying those to the decisions that we make in terms of our annual budget, as well as our land use decisions, and the decisions we make to protect habitat and open space and forests. So that's my best nutshell on GPI. If you want to check it out, go on maryland.gov. Check out Smart, Green, and Growing. That will take you to GPI. You can also check out any of our 16 strategic goals for driving our state forward. What's the goal? What's the difference between a dream and a goal? A deadline. A deadline. So on the contrary to all sound political advice, we actually set goals and benchmarks and deadlines in monthly and 2-year increments while we're still in office. And I found it works a lot better that way. So all of these you can see whether we're achieving our goals on improving the skills of our people, the sustainability of our way of life, the health of our people, or the security of our people. And you can check it out. It's all online at statestat.gov, and it will be there until January 21st. So take a screenshot.
All right, let me yield the floor and turn it back over to David.
Obviously, you've had to deal with a lot of complex issues, and many of them have been raised here. But governors don't have to deal with global issues to certainly the extent that a president does. And we live in a very complex and challenging world. We were just reminded of that the other day. Give us your sort of general sense of what America's role is in the world today and what it should be tomorrow. And with that, talk a little bit about how we balance this security challenge that is obviously very real. We all feel it particularly today, and our commitment to individual liberty and privacy.
That's the last question?
I've got 3 follow-ups.
Okay. Our hearts, I know, tonight go out to the people of Paris and France for what they are suffering. I wish it weren't so, but we are going to be going through probably 100 years of figuring out how to deal with this new type of warfare, asymmetrical warfare, global terrorism, and extremism. The most important assets we bring to this challenge are the power of our principles. And as we exercise our military, our diplomatic, our economic might in response to these threats, it's very important that we strive always to exercise those powers in ways that are consistent with our principles and our belief in the dignity of every individual, that we not throw overboard certain norms in human behavior, humane treatment of prisoners and the like, that actually make us a beacon of hope and light throughout this world of ours. So when those attacks happened, and when the 9/11 attacks happened, I was mayor of Baltimore, and it seemed that things were happening all around us. We set out to be a leader in homeland security and preparedness, and I continued that drive in through state government. And I felt it was the only responsible choice given the location of the nation's capital right there in the middle of that mid-Atlantic region. So we still have a lot of work to do to be more prepared and to up our game. That too is one of our strategic goals on our website, 12 core capacities. We've gotten better on all of them. In terms of making better sense of this world and the choices we make within it, I believe that's what's required. And I say this after having sat down now, David, for the last 1.5 to 2 years with a lot of really bright people who have spent their lifetimes working in national security or diplomacy or State Department and the like. We have to move beyond what very often were quick military reactions to the threats around our globe to a new and more consistent and intelligent way of being consistently engaged all around the world. We are not an island nation. For a time it might have felt like that because we were separated by 2 big oceans. But it is only at our own peril that we disengage from the rest of the world. And right now, whether you talk about climate change, whether you talk about improving our ability to respond to health issues, whether it's AIDS or pandemic or the like, or that one yearning that unites all of us around the world, which is the yearning for a job, we have a role to play. It is a leading role. And foreign policy begins at home. So we need to make better choices at home. We need to make our economy go and grow and work for all of us, because that too is a security imperative and shows our neighbors on this small planet that in fact we have discovered a better way forward. And it's a way forward that can also work in their own country, certainly better than the sort of extremism and the violence and the hate that some are peddling. So broadly, David, that's kind of how I see us reimagining our engagement in this world.
My real question was, how realistic was The Wire
That was going to be mine too.
The Wire did a good job of portraying just how violent, hopeless parts of Baltimore had become. But I think they greatly underplayed the tremendous comeback of the people of Baltimore. So having just celebrated the bicentennial of the Star-Spangled Banner, we're hoping that HBO might make another series called Land of the Free and Home of the Brave. Because the thing I love best about the people of Baltimore, the black and white and free people of Baltimore, is that they have never, ever backed down from a fight. In fact, we were doing Homeland Security 200 years before it became a buzzword.
Well, Governor O'Malley, thank you so much for making time for us today. It's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, man. Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Thank you all so much for being here. We have former Governor Mitch Daniels on Monday of next week in this very room here. We have a whole series of events coming up. You can find out about all of it at politics.uchicago.edu. We welcome you to our entire series of winter quarter fellow seminars and speaking events. Thank you all so much, and be safe tonight.